My dad started calling me Poppy after mom died of cancer. When he drugged my water and put me in her red anniversary lingerie, I realized he thought I was his dead wife. Now I have to hand over our baby for court-ordered grandparent visits while he still calls me by her name. When mom inevitably lost her battle with melanoma, dad sat at her hospital bed for 19 hours hugging her dead body. I can't do this without you, Poppy. Please don't leave me. He rocked her back and forth. The nurses had to sedate him so he'd let go. And even as his muscles gave out and his eyes closed, he was still whispering, Poppy. When we got home, dad walked around like he wasn't really there. For weeks, he left all mom's stuff exactly where it was. Her coffee mug sat on the counter with her lipstick mark that made me cry every morning. He asked me, Stacy, could you make her chicken parmesan tonight? It would help me feel like she's still here. While I cooked, dad watched old home videos on repeat in the living room. At first, it was nice hearing mom's laugh all the time and pretending like she was still with us. But as winter turned to spring, dad's sadness shifted into something scary. He stopped sleeping in their bedroom and moved to the couch, telling me, I can't sleep in there, Stacy. It smells like her perfume and I hear her breathing. At 3 in the morning, I'd find him hugging her pillow talking to nobody. I suggested therapy and he actually agreed to go twice a week. But it wasn't long before I found appointment cards in the trash. Sigh. One April night when I came out of the bathroom, he called me Poppy in the dark hallway. He immediately followed up with, sorry, Stacy, you looked like her for a second. His apology was anything but reassuring because something in his eyes had changed. I reminded him, Dad, I'm Stacy, your daughter, and he nodded slowly without saying anything. I thought it would end there, but he called me mom's name more and more. I tried to tell myself it was just part of the process, but that's when he started buying me the same clothes mom wore. These ugly flower shirts kept showing up in my closet, and he'd lie. They were on sale, and I thought you'd look nice in them. When I told them that they were mom's style, he'd just say exactly with this sickening smile. My shampoo kept getting replaced with mom's brand, and when I switched it back, it would mysteriously change again within days. Then one morning, all my stuff had been moved to their bedroom. When I asked why, through tears he said, I need you close, Poppy, Stacy. I mean Stacy. The nightmares are getting worse. That was the last time he called me Stacy. I could tell something terrible was coming, but nothing could have prepared me for their anniversary morning. I woke up to him on my bed with a breakfast tray, roses everywhere, candles burning, and their wedding song playing. He smiled and said, happy anniversary, my love. I can't believe it's been 20 beautiful years of marriage. I sat up fast and said, Dad, what the F is this? Suddenly, I was hit with a wave of dizziness. When I tried to catch my balance, he smiled. You've been so tense recently, Poppy, so I put anxiety medication in your water. I sat there helpless as he pulled out red undergarments. He held it up saying, you wore this on our wedding night. Time to put it on again. I shook my head hard and said, Dad, please, you're scaring me. I'm Stacy. But his eyes looked empty. When I pushed the tray away, he grabbed my wrist hard. Why are you acting like this, Poppy? He said while I screamed, Mom is dead. I'm Stacy. I'm your effing daughter. His face twisted and he yelled, stop lying. You're my wife. You've always been my wife. He lunged forward trying to kiss me, hands grabbing at my chest while saying, this is our anniversary. Stop pretending you don't remember our first time. I screamed, get off me, and bit his lip until it bled. As I stumbled to the bathroom, he called, Poppy, come back. Don't lock me out on our special day. I barely locked the door before he got there. He pounded on it saying, I'll be gentle, I promise. Just like our first time. Please don't be scared, my love. When I didn't respond, his tone shifted to anger. Poppy, open this door right now. A wife doesn't lock out her husband. All I wanted to do was call for help, but I didn't have my phone on me. When I heard him punching through the door, I screamed, help! Somebody help me. Thankfully, somehow my neighbor Mr. Lee heard. Dad was able to unlock the door after he punched through it, and he had this sick smile. My skin crawled when he said, there you are, sweetheart. No more hiding, catching me with a needle. This will help you remember who you are. I fought back as hard as I could, though I knew he could overpower me. But everything stopped when Mr. Lee pounded on our front door. John, is everything okay in there? He yelled. Dad called out, everything's fine, Tom. Poppy's just having one of her episodes again. But Mr. Lee yelled back, John, Poppy's gone. I'm calling the police. I sobbed, I'm not Mom. I'm Stacy. The police found him on top of me telling them, officers, there's been a misunderstanding. This is my wife, Poppy. Even in handcuffs, he cried, Poppy, tell them you're my wife. One officer asked, Miss, what's your name? And I sobbed, Stacy, his daughter. Dad started thrashing. She's confused. She's sick. We've been married 20 years. As they led him away, he kept yelling, Poppy, I love you. He was put in a psychiatric holding facility. He had been locked up for 2 months when I got the news. It came in the form of 2 pink lines on a pregnancy stick. My heart dropped because I thought I was a V-card owner. The test fell from my shaking hands onto the bathroom floor. I stared at those 2 pink lines until they blurred through my tears. This couldn't be happening. Not from that morning. Not from him. I grabbed the edge of the sink as another wave of nausea hit. The morning sickness had started 3 weeks ago, but I'd convinced myself it was just stress. Now the truth stared back at me from that little plastic stick on the floor. My phone buzzed on the counter. Another letter had arrived from the psychiatric facility. They'd been coming every few days, forwarded by the hospital staff who were required to screen his mail. Each envelope made my hands shake before I even opened it. This one was thicker than usual. Inside, his handwriting covered page after page in cramped lines. The first paragraph made my stomach turn. My dearest Poppy, they keep telling me you're someone else, but I know better. I remember every moment of our life together. I remember the night we made our baby. I dropped the letter and ran to the toilet, emptying what little was in my stomach. He couldn't know. There was no way he could know about the pregnancy. But his words echoed in my head as I sat on the cold bathroom floor. The facility called it therapeutic writing and said it helped him process his delusions. They assured me all mail was monitored and that he was making progress. But reading his letters felt like drowning in his sickness all over again. I forced myself to pick up the pages and continue reading. He described our wedding night in disturbing detail, mixing real memories of Mom with twisted fantasies about me. He wrote about baby names and nursery colors. He promised he'd be home soon to take care of his pregnant wife. My hands trembled as I reached the last page. At the bottom, he'd drawn a heart with John plus Poppy forever inside. Below that, in different handwriting, a nurse had added a note. Patient continues to show signs of improvement. Family visits may be beneficial for recovery process. I crumpled the papers and threw them in the trash. Family visits. They wanted me to visit him, to sit across from the man who assaulted me and pretend we were making progress. The doorbell rang, making me jump. Through the people, I saw Mr. Lee holding a casserole dish. Since that morning, he'd been checking on me every few days, bringing food and making sure I was okay. I opened the door but stayed behind it, not wanting him to see my tear-stained face. He handed me the dish with a gentle smile. Just wanted to drop this off, Stacy. It's my wife's lasagna recipe. The smell of tomato sauce hit me wrong, and I had to swallow hard to keep from gagging. Mr. Lee's face creased with concern. You feeling all right? You look a little pale. I forced a smile and took the dish. Just tired. Thank you for this. He nodded but didn't move to leave. The facility called me yesterday yesterday. They said your father's been asking about you. Wanted to know if I'd seen his wife around the neighborhood. My grip tightened on the casserole dish. Even from inside that place, he was still trying to find me. Still convinced I was her. I told them I hadn't seen Poppy in months, Mr. Lee continued, because she passed away. But they said he got agitated when I said that. Started yelling about how everyone was lying to him. I thanked Mr. Lee again and closed the door, setting the lasagna on the counter. The smell made my stomach roll again. Everything made me sick these days. Coffee, perfume, even the laundry detergent. My phone rang. Dr. Patterson's office. I'd finally made an appointment after the third positive test, but part of me still hoped this was all some mistake. The nurse's voice was professionally cheerful. Just calling to confirm your prenatal appointment tomorrow at 2. We'll do an ultrasound to determine how far along you are. How far along? The words made it real in a way the tests hadn't. There was something growing inside me. Something that started that horrible morning when Dad drugged my water and tried to recreate his anniversary. After hanging up, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at Mom's empty chair. Her coffee mug still sat on the counter where Dad had left it. I'd thought about washing it so many times, but couldn't bring myself to erase that last trace of her lipstick. What would she think of all this? Would she blame herself for getting sick? For leaving us alone? For not seeing how fragile Dad's mind really was? There's something deeply unsettling about how quickly Dad's grief twisted into this complete break from reality. I wonder what was already broken in his mind before Mom died that made him unable to tell his daughter from his wife. The house felt too quiet. I turned on the TV just for noise, but the afternoon talk show was discussing family trauma, and I quickly changed the channel. Everything seemed to circle back to families lately. Broken ones, grieving ones, sick ones like mine. I pulled out my laptop and searched for support groups. Survivors of assault, children of mentally ill parents, pregnancy after trauma. The search results overwhelmed me. So many people carrying similar pain. One forum caught my eye. When your protector becomes your predator. The title made me flinch, but I clicked anyway. Story after story of people whose family members had hurt them. People who understood the unique agony of being betrayed by someone who was supposed to keep you safe. I started typing my story but deleted it 3 times. How could I explain that my father thought I was my dead mother? That he drugged me and tried to consummate their anniversary? That now I was carrying proof of the worst morning of my life? My phone buzzed again. Another text from the facility's social worker. Your father is making progress but would benefit from family support. Please consider scheduling a supervised visit. I deleted the message without responding. They'd been pushing for visits for weeks now, convinced that seeing me would help ground him in reality. But I knew better. Seeing me would only feed his delusion that I was Poppy. The afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen window, highlighting dust motes in the air. Mom used to say they looked like tiny dancers. Now they just reminded me of how empty the house felt. I forced myself to eat some crackers and ginger ale, the only things that stayed down anymore. The pregnancy website said morning sickness usually ended after the first trimester. I counted weeks on my fingers, trying not to think about what was happening inside my body. 8 weeks. That's how long it had been since that morning. 8 weeks of nightmares and therapy sessions and letters from the facility. 8 weeks of jumping at every noise and checking the locks obsessively. The therapist they'd assigned me specialized in trauma. Dr. Martinez had a soft voice and never pushed too hard, but even she seemed shocked when I told her about the pregnancy. Have you considered all your options? She'd asked gently. I had. Late at night, I'd researched everything. Adoption, termination, raising a baby alone at 19. Each option felt impossible in its own way. How could I make a decision about something that came from such a horrible place? The doorbell rang again. This time it was a delivery driver with a package I hadn't ordered. The return address was from a baby store. Inside, a tiny yellow onesie with Daddy's Girl printed on it. My hands shook as I read the gift message. For our little miracle. Love, John. I dropped the box and ran to the bathroom, barely making it in time. He couldn't have ordered this. Patients at the facility didn't have internet access. Someone must have done it for him. But who? And how did he know? I called the facility immediately, my voice shaking with anger. The administrator sounded apologetic but confused. I assure you, Ms. Johnson, your father has no access to online shopping or outside communication beyond supervised letters. But the onesie was real. The gift message was in his words. Someone was helping him, and that terrified me more than anything. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every shadow looked like someone watching. I'd changed all the locks after Dad was taken away. But what if he'd made copies? What if someone was helping him from the outside? I got up and checked the windows again. All locked. The motion sensor lights Mr. Lee had helped me install were working, but I still felt exposed, like eyes were watching from the darkness. In the morning, I found another letter slipped under the front door. Not mailed this time. Hand-delivered. My name was written on the envelope in Dad's handwriting. Inside, a single line. I know about our baby Poppy. I'll be home soon. I called the police, but they said without proof he'd violated the restraining order, there was nothing they could do. The facility insisted he was still there, still in his secured ward, but somehow, his words had found their way to my door. Dr. Martinez fit me in for an emergency session that afternoon. I sat in her office, clutching the letter and the onesie, trying to make sense of what was happening. It's possible someone from the facility is helping him, she said carefully. A staff member who's been manipulated by his delusions, or another patient with outside privileges. The thought made me sick. Someone believed his story enough to help him. Someone thought they were reuniting a husband and wife, not enabling a dangerous man to stalk his daughter. You need to consider your safety, doctor, Martinez continued. Is there somewhere else you could stay for a while? But where could I go? We had no other family. Mom's parents had died years ago. Dad's family had cut contact when he married outside their faith. I was alone except for Mr. Lee's occasional check-ins. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with a notepad, trying to make a plan. Change my phone number, install more security cameras, maybe look into moving to a new apartment. Each item on the list felt like admitting defeat. The ultrasound appointment was tomorrow. Part of me wanted to cancel, to pretend none of this was happening, but the nausea and exhaustion were daily reminders that my body was changing whether I acknowledged it or not. I picked up Mom's coffee mug, running my finger over her lipstick mark. I don't know what to do, I whispered to the empty kitchen. I don't know how to be strong enough for this. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and sighs. Somewhere in the walls, pipes gurgled. The refrigerator hummed, normal sounds that used to be comforting, but now felt ominous. My phone lit up with another message from the facility. This time it was Dr. Brennan, Dad's psychiatrist. Ms. Johnson, I'd like to discuss your father's treatment plan. He's fixated on the idea that you're pregnant. Perhaps addressing this delusion directly would help. I stared at the message. He wanted me to tell Dad about the pregnancy, to confirm his sick fantasy. The thought made bile rise in my throat. I typed back, he's not delusional about the pregnancy. He's delusional about who I am. The response came quickly. I understand this is difficult, but confronting his false beliefs with reality often helps. Would you consider a supervised video call? I turned off my phone without responding. They didn't understand. To Dad, I wasn't Stacy anymore. I was Poppy. And telling him him about the pregnancy would only cement that delusion deeper. Outside, a car drove slowly past the house. I watched through the curtain as it stopped at the corner, idling. My heart raced until it finally pulled away. Every car was suspicious now. Every stranger could be someone Dad had convinced to help him. I made another cup of ginger tea and sat in Mom's chair for the first time since she died. It felt wrong, like I was trespassing, but I needed to feel close to her, to remember who I really was. Stacy. I was Stacy, not Poppy, not his wife, his daughter. The distinction felt crucial to hold on to, even as my body carried evidence of his delusion. Tomorrow, I would go to the ultrasound. Tomorrow, I would see exactly how real this pregnancy was. But tonight, I just needed to survive until morning. The ultrasound appointment arrived faster than expected. I sat in the waiting room surrounded by happy couples, their hands intertwined over growing bellies. The contrast made my isolation sharper. When the technician called my name, I walked into the dim room alone. The gel felt cold against my skin. On the screen, a tiny flickering heartbeat appeared. 8 weeks and 3 days. The technician printed images without asking if I wanted them. I stuffed them in my purse, unable to look at the evidence of that morning. Back home, I found another package on my doorstep. This time, prenatal vitamins with a note in Dad's handwriting for our growing family. My hands shook as I carried the box inside. The facility had sworn he had no outside access, yet somehow these items kept arriving. I called the facility again, demanding answers. The administrator put me on hold for 20 minutes before returning with unsettling news. A new orderly had started 3 weeks ago. They'd discovered he'd been smuggling items and messages for patients. He'd been terminated immediately, but the damage was done. The administrator assured me they were reviewing all security protocols, but I knew Dad had found his way around their system once. He would do it again. That evening, I installed new locks on every door. Mr. Lee helped me set up additional security cameras around the property. As we worked, he mentioned seeing an unfamiliar car parked across the street several times that week. The description matched the one I'd noticed before. I barely slept anymore. Every sound made me check the cameras. Every shadow could be someone Dad had convinced to watch me. The pregnancy exhaustion battled with hypervigilance, leaving me drained but unable to rest. 3 days later, I received a call from the facility's director. Dad had requested a competency evaluation. His psychiatrist believed he was showing improvement and might qualify for supervised day passes within a month. My blood ran cold at the thought. I immediately called Dr. Martinez for an emergency session. She helped me draft a victim impact statement detailing why Dad remained dangerous, but she warned me that if his doctors deemed him improved, my statement might not be enough to keep him confined. The facility's push for family visits intensified. Daily calls from social workers insisted that seeing me would help Dad accept reality. Talk about delivery service from hell, getting daddy's girl onesies when daddy thinks your mommy is peak horror movie material, and somehow the facility's oops we had a corrupt orderly excuse makes it worse than a simple security breach. They didn't understand that in his mind, I wasn't his daughter anymore. I was his wife, carrying his child. I started looking for apartments in other neighborhoods. The house held too many memories, too many vulnerabilities, but every listing I viewed felt exposed, unsafe. How could any place protect me from someone who believed I belonged to him? One morning, I woke to find my mailbox stuffed with baby magazines, subscriptions I hadn't ordered, all addressed to Mrs. Poppy Johnson. The violation of seeing Mom's name used this way made me physically ill. Someone had my address, my information, and was helping Dad maintain his delusion. I spent hours on the phone canceling subscriptions, only to have new ones appear. Baby furniture catalogs, maternity wear, parenting newsletters. Each arrival felt like another invasion, another reminder that Dad's reach extended beyond his hospital walls. The morning sickness worsened as stress accumulated. Dr. Patterson prescribed medication, but I could barely keep it down. She expressed concern about my weight loss and insisted on weekly checkups, another appointment to add to my growing list of survival tasks. I started documenting everything, every package, every letter, every strange occurrence. Dr. Martinez said it would help build a case for continued confinement, but the folder grew thicker while Dad's release seemed increasingly inevitable. One afternoon, while organizing Mom's closet, I found her journal. The entries from before her diagnosis revealed growing concern about Dad's possessiveness. She'd written about his jealousy, his need to know her whereabouts constantly, signs I'd missed, focused on her illness instead of his obsession. Her final entries broke my heart. She worried about leaving me alone with him, sensing something unstable beneath his devotion. She'd even researched grief counselors, planning to insist he attend after she passed, plans that died with her. The facility called with updates on Dad's progress. He'd started group therapy, showing remarkable insight into his condition. The psychiatrist praised his participation, his apparent acceptance of Poppy's death, but I knew better. He was performing, saying what they wanted to hear. I contacted a lawyer about strengthening the restraining order. She reviewed my documentation but warned that without new incidents, courts rarely extended protective orders against patients showing improvement. The system favored rehabilitation over victim protection. My belly began to show slightly at 10 weeks. The physical evidence of pregnancy made everything more real, more urgent. I had decisions to make, but every option felt impossible while Dad's release loomed. Mr. Lee started checking on me daily. He'd noticed more unfamiliar cars, strange people walking past the house multiple times. We compared notes, building a pattern of surveillance that felt coordinated but remained unprovable. One evening, while reviewing security footage, I spotted a familiar face, the terminated orderly from the facility, sitting in a parked car outside my house. I called the police immediately, but he drove away before they arrived. Without proof of wrongdoing, they could only document the incident. The facility denied any knowledge of their former employees' actions. They insisted Dad had no way to contact him after the termination. But I knew Dad's manipulation skills. He'd convinced this man to help before getting caught. Who else had he influenced? I started varying my routines, taking different routes to appointments, shopping at different stores. The hypervigilance exhausted me, but predictability felt dangerous. Every public space became a potential encounter with Dad's helpers. Dr. Martinez increased our sessions to twice weekly. She taught me grounding techniques for the panic attacks that struck without warning, but no amount of therapy could ease the knowledge that Dad was manipulating his way toward freedom. The baby moved for the first time at 13 weeks, a flutter that should have been magical but instead reminded me of its origin. I sat in the bathtub, watching my stomach, trying to separate the innocent life inside from the violence that created it. More packages arrived, maternity clothes in Mom's size, a breast pump, nursery decorations. Each delivery felt like Dad reaching through the walls of his confinement to touch my life. The facility insisted they'd increase security, but his influence persisted. I found a support group for children of mentally ill parents. The meetings helped, but my situation felt unique. Other members dealt with depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. No one else's parent had replaced them with a dead spouse in their mind. The group leader, a therapist named Dr. Cole, offered individual sessions. She specialized in family trauma and understood the complexity of loving someone whose mind had betrayed them. them. She didn't push me to forgive or maintain contact like others had. Through Dr. Cole, I learned about delusional misidentification syndrome. Dad's condition had a name, patterns, typical progressions. Understanding the clinical aspects helped me separate the father I'd known from the man who attacked me. But knowledge didn't ease the fear. I started preparing for Dad's potential release. Self-defense classes helped me feel less vulnerable, though my pregnancy limited what I could do. The instructor, a woman named Min who'd survived her own trauma, adapted techniques for my changing body. Min introduced me to other survivors who'd rebuilt their lives after family violence. Their stories gave me hope, but also revealed hard truths. Some had to completely disappear to escape. Others lived in constant vigilance. Few found peace while their attackers lived. The facility scheduled Dad's competency hearing. I submitted my impact statement, documentation of continued harassment, evidence of his unchanged delusions. But his psychiatrist submitted glowing reports of progress. The system weighted professional opinions over victim testimony. I attended the hearing, sitting in the back where Dad couldn't see me. He appeared calm, rational, discussing his grief over Poppy's death with apparent clarity. Only I caught the moments his eyes searched the room, looking for his wife. The judge granted supervised day passes to begin in 2 weeks. My lawyer filed an emergency appeal, but we both knew it would likely fail. The countdown to Dad's partial freedom began, and with it, my time to prepare. I accelerated my apartment search, focusing on buildings with security, doormen, controlled access. The expense would drain my savings, but safety mattered more than money. I found a place 20 miles away, far from Dad's usual haunts. Moving felt like abandoning Mom's memory, but staying meant risking my life. I packed secretly, a few boxes at a time, storing them at Mr. Lee's house. He'd become my closest ally, understanding the danger others dismissed. The facility notified me of Dad's first scheduled pass. He would have 4 hours of supervised freedom to reintegrate into society. 4 hours where he could potentially discover I'd moved. 4 hours to plan his next manipulation. I spent that day at Min's studio, training until exhaustion numbed my fear. She taught me to use everyday objects as weapons, to create distance, to scream effectively. Skills I prayed I'd never need but practiced religiously. That evening, I returned to find a rose on my doorstep. No note, but I recognized the variety. Mom's favorite, from the bush Dad had planted for their anniversary. The facility confirmed he'd returned on time, his supervisor reporting no incidents. But that rose told a different story. I moved the next day. Mr. Lee helped transport the last boxes while I watched for suspicious cars. The new apartment felt sterile but safe, with cameras, alarms, and neighbors who didn't know my history. But safety proved illusory. Within a week, baby items began arriving at my new address. The facility swore they hadn't released my information, but Dad's network had found me anyway. The invisible web of his influence stretched farther than I'd imagined. I considered leaving the state, but pregnancy complicated everything. I needed consistent medical care, couldn't risk my health or the baby's by running. Dr. Patterson had become the one stable element in my chaos, and I couldn't afford to start over with new doctors. The baby's movements grew stronger, more frequent. Each kick reminded me of the decision I still hadn't made. Adoption felt like abandoning an innocent child to an unknown fate. Keeping it meant forever linking my life to that horrible morning. No choice felt right. Dad's passes increased to twice weekly, then every other day. The facility praised his progress, his apparent acceptance of reality, but the packages kept coming. The surveillance continued. He was building something, planning something, and I could only wait. I installed new locks at the apartment, added extra security measures, but no amount of preparation eased the feeling of being hunted. Dad had turned his delusion into a twisted reality where I lived in constant fear, even from a distance. Dr. Cole helped me develop safety plans for various scenarios. What to do if Dad appeared at my door, how to respond if he approached in public, where to run, who to call, how to protect myself, and the growing life inside me. Contingencies for nightmares I prayed would never materialize. But even the best plans couldn't account for Dad's next move. During a supervised outing, he visited a lawyer and filed for custody of his unborn grandchild. The legal documents arrived at my new address, proving again that his network had found me. The custody filing revealed the depth of his delusion. He claimed I was mentally unstable, denying my mother's identity. He presented himself as a concerned grandfather, trying to protect his grandchild from a delusional daughter. Dad's getting day passes while sending baby stuff to her new secret address. Something's not adding up here. How does his network keep finding her when the facility claims they're monitoring everything he does? Makes me wonder who's really helping him track her down. The reversal of reality made my skin crawl. My lawyer called it a common tactic among abusers, using the legal system as a weapon, but common didn't make it less terrifying. Now I faced not just Dad's release, but a legal battle that would force me into proximity with him. The facility finally acknowledged the severity of the situation when presented with the custody filing. His psychiatrist admitted concern about the sophistication of Dad's manipulation, but admitting mistakes didn't revoke his increasing freedom. I started recording everything: phone calls, encounters, deliveries, building an evidence trail that might protect me in court, but documenting my fear felt like admitting defeat, acknowledging that Dad had succeeded in destroying my peace. At 20 weeks pregnant, I felt the baby hiccup for the first time. Such a human moment from something conceived in violence. I placed my hand on my belly, trying to reconcile the innocent movements with their origin. The anatomy scan revealed a girl. The technician offered to print pictures, but I declined. Knowing the gender made everything more real, more complicated. A daughter who would never know her grandmother, whose father was also her grandfather. The twisted family tree made me nauseous. Dad's supervised releases expanded to overnight passes. He had to stay at a halfway house, check in regularly, submit to monitoring. But 12 hours of freedom meant 12 hours to plan, to coordinate with his helpers, to close the distance between us. I varied my schedule more drastically, sometimes leaving the apartment at 3 a.m. to avoid patterns. The pregnancy exhaustion warred with survival instincts, leaving me perpetually drained, but unpredictability had become my only defense. One morning, I found Dad standing outside my building. He wasn't violating any order, just standing on the public sidewalk. When our eyes met, he smiled and waved like nothing had happened, like he was just a father visiting his pregnant daughter. Security footage showed he'd stood there for 3 hours, waiting for me to appear. His supervisor confirmed he'd returned to the halfway house on time. Technically, no violation had occurred, but the message was clear. He'd found me, and the system wouldn't stop him. I called Dr. Martinez in a panic. She helped me breathe through the terror, reminding me of my safety plans, but plans felt inadequate against Dad's patient persistence. He had time, resources, and a delusion that made him unstoppable. The police increased patrols around my building, but they couldn't arrest someone for standing on a sidewalk. The law protected his rights more than my safety. I was trapped between legal limitations and very real danger. I stopped leaving the apartment unless absolutely necessary. Groceries delivered, appointments rescheduled to telehealth when possible. Self-imposed imprisonment felt safer than risking another encounter, but isolation fed its own kind of madness. Mr. Mr. Lee visited weekly, bringing news from the old neighborhood. He'd installed cameras around his own property after noticing continued surveillance. Dad's network was watching him too, monitoring my only consistent support. The custody case moved forward despite my lawyer's attempts to dismiss it. Dad's attorney painted him as a recovering widower concerned about his grandchild. My documented fears became evidence of instability in their narrative. The system I'd trusted for protection became another weapon against me. At 25 weeks, the baby's movements became visible from the outside. My belly rippled with kicks and rolls. Life grew inside me while I fought to preserve my own. The irony felt cruel, unfair, cosmically twisted. Dad requested a court-ordered paternity test to establish grandparental rights. His lawyer argued that my delusions about the baby's parentage required verification. The violation of having to prove my own assault through DNA felt like another layer of abuse, but the request revealed something important. Dad knew the truth. Somewhere beneath his delusion, he understood what he'd done. The knowledge made him more dangerous, not less. He wasn't just sick, he was strategic. I met with a family law specialist who'd handled similar cases. She warned me that grandparental rights were difficult to deny completely. Even with the assault, even with his mental illness, courts favored maintaining family connections. The baby I carried might legally bind me to Dad forever. The thought sent me spiraling. Dr. Cole increased our sessions, working through the trauma of potentially never escaping Dad's influence. She helped me see that survival meant more than physical safety. I had to protect my mind, my sense of self. I started writing letters to the baby, explaining the truth in age-appropriate ways she might understand someday, documenting my love for her despite her origin, creating a record that couldn't be twisted by Dad's delusions or legal manipulations. The facility announced Dad's transition to unsupervised passes. 6 months of remarkable progress had earned him near total freedom. Only nightly check-ins at the halfway house remained. The final barrier between us was crumbling. I made preparations to leave the state. New identity documents waited in a safety deposit box. Cash accumulated slowly to avoid detection. An exit strategy that felt both necessary and impossible with a baby coming. But first, I had to survive the custody hearing. Dad would be there, in the same room, presenting himself as a concerned grandfather. I would have to face him, speak truth to his delusions, and hope the judge saw through his performance. The night before the hearing, I sat in my apartment surrounded by evidence. Photos of injuries, threatening letters, documentation of stalking. Proof that should be enough but might not matter. The legal system operated on different logic than survival instinct. I felt the baby settle into position, head down, preparing for birth still months away. We were both preparing for battles we shouldn't have to fight, both victims of one man's inability to let go. As dawn broke, I dressed carefully for court. Professional but not provocative. Nothing that could feed Dad's delusions. I tucked ultrasound photos in my purse, evidence of the life I was fighting to protect. Mr. Lee met me at the courthouse, offering silent support. He'd testified about that morning, about calling the police. His presence reminded me that someone had believed me once. Maybe the judge would too. But as I climbed the courthouse steps, I saw Dad waiting by the entrance, unsupervised, unrestrained, smiling at his pregnant wife. The system had already failed. Now I had to face him and fight for my daughter's future. I froze at the courthouse entrance, my heart hammering against my ribs. Dad stood there in a pressed suit, his hair neatly combed, looking every bit the concerned grandfather he pretended to be. His eyes locked onto mine with that familiar intensity that made my skin crawl. Mr. Lee stepped protectively closer, his presence the only thing keeping me from turning and running. Dad's smile widened as he took in my pregnant belly, visible even under my loose blazer. He took a step forward, and I instinctively backed away. The security guard at the entrance noticed our tense standoff and moved between us. Dad raised his hands innocently, explaining he was just greeting his daughter before a family court matter. The guard looked to me for confirmation, and I managed a tight nod before hurrying inside. The courtroom felt suffocating despite its high ceilings. I sat with my lawyer on one side, Dad and his attorney on the other. The space between us might as well have been an ocean for all the distance it provided. I could feel his eyes boring into me, trying to catch my gaze. The judge entered, and we all stood. As proceedings began, Dad's lawyer painted a picture of a grieving widower concerned about his grandchild's welfare. They presented Dad's psychiatric progress reports, his successful completion of therapy programs, his model behavior during supervised release. My lawyer countered with documentation of the assault, the restraining order, the continued harassment through third parties. But Dad's attorney skillfully reframed each incident as misunderstandings or coincidences. The baby gifts were simply a grandfather's excitement. The surveillance was concern for my safety. When Dad took the stand, his performance was flawless. He spoke softly about losing his wife, about his mental health struggles, about wanting to support his daughter through her pregnancy. He never once called me Poppy, never mentioned our supposed marriage. He'd learned exactly what to say. During a recess, I escaped to the bathroom, gripping the sink as waves of nausea hit. The baby kicked hard, responding to my stress. I splashed water on my face, trying to compose myself for round two. Back in the courtroom, my lawyer presented the letters Dad had written from the facility. The judge read them silently, his expression unreadable. Dad's attorney argued they were written during the acute phase of his illness, before treatment took effect. Ancient history, irrelevant to his current mental state. The judge asked me to testify about my concerns. I stood on shaking legs, placing my hand on the Bible. As I recounted that morning, Dad's expression never changed. He sat there looking sadly concerned, like a father hearing his daughter's delusions for the first time. I explained about the packages arriving at my new address, about seeing him outside my building, about the network of people helping him, but without concrete proof linking him to these incidents. My words felt hollow. The judge asked probing questions about my own mental health, my therapy sessions, my plans for the baby. Dad's attorney seized on my admission that I'd considered adoption. They painted me as unstable, unfit, needing family support. Dad's courtroom act deserves an Oscar, playing the worried grandpa while the judge somehow misses that this whole mess started with him confusing his daughter for his dead wife. Dad sat there nodding sympathetically, playing the role of concerned father perfectly. I wanted to scream at his performance, but I kept my voice level, professional. The hearing stretched through lunch. My lawyer presented affidavits from Dr. Martinez and Dr. Cole supporting my mental stability. Dad's team countered with their own experts discussing the importance of family bonds, the benefits of grandparental involvement, the healing power of reconciliation. As afternoon wore on, the judge seemed increasingly sympathetic to Dad's position. He asked about supervised visitation, about gradually rebuilding trust. My lawyer objected, citing the ongoing restraining order, but the judge noted that could be modified if circumstances had changed. During another recess, I overheard Dad in the hallway talking to his lawyer about nursery preparations. He spoke loud enough for me to hear, describing the crib he'd bought, the rocking chair that matched the one Poppy had loved. His voice carried that same delusional certainty, just masked better now. Back in session, the judge delivered his initial thoughts. He commended Dad on his treatment progress and expressed concern about about depriving a child of grandparental relationships, he suggested a graduated approach: supervised visits at a neutral location, progressing to unsupervised if things went well. My lawyer requested time to submit additional documentation. The judge granted 2 weeks but warned that without new evidence, he was inclined to allow limited grandparental access. The gavel came down, and just like that, Dad had won the first round. I rushed from the courthouse, Mr. Lee helping me navigate the crowd of other families waiting for their own hearings. Dad didn't follow, but I felt his eyes tracking me until the doors closed between us. In the parking garage, I barely made it to a trash can before vomiting. That evening, I sat with my lawyer strategizing. She was honest about our chances. Courts favored family reunification. Dad's apparent recovery worked in his favor. Without proof of recent threats or violations, the judge would likely grant some form of access. I spent the next days gathering evidence. The terminated orderly from the facility had disappeared, but I tracked down former patients who'd been there with Dad. Most refused to talk, but one woman agreed to meet at a coffee shop. She told me about Dad's manipulation of other patients, how he'd convinced several that I was his wife being kept from him. He'd traded commissary items for favors, built a network of believers who saw him as a romantic victim. She'd watched him practice his sane act for the doctors while maintaining his delusions in private, but she wouldn't testify. Fear of retaliation, of being dragged back into that world, kept her silent. She wished me luck and left quickly, glancing over her shoulder. Another dead end in my search for proof. I visited the facility, hoping to find staff willing to speak off the record. The administrator who'd been so apologetic before now seemed defensive, worried about liability. They insisted Dad had responded remarkably well to treatment. The letters, the delusions, were all in the past. Dr. Brennan, Dad's psychiatrist, agreed to meet with me. He explained Dad's diagnosis, his treatment plan, his impressive progress. When I asked if Dad still believed I was Poppy, the doctor hedged. Recovery wasn't linear. Some confusion might persist, but overall, Dad understood reality now. I showed him the recent letters, the baby gifts arriving at my new address. Dr. Brennan seemed troubled, but suggested they could be from well-meaning friends, not Dad himself. Without proof of his involvement, they indicated nothing about his mental state. Min from the self-defense class connected me with a private investigator who specialized in stalking cases. He reviewed my documentation, interviewed neighbors at my new building, checked security footage from nearby businesses, but Dad had been careful. No direct evidence linked him to the harassment. The investigator did discover something useful. The custody lawyer Dad had hired had previously worked cases where grandparents gained custody from unfit parents. His strategy was clear: establish grandparental rights, then build a case for full custody based on my supposed instability. I met with Dr. Cole for an emergency session. She helped me process the possibility of Dad gaining access to the baby. We discussed safety plans for supervised visits, ways to document any concerning behavior, how to protect my daughter while complying with court orders. The 2 weeks passed too quickly. I submitted the former patient's statement, though she'd refused to sign it. The private investigator's report showed patterns of surveillance but no smoking GN. Dr. Cole and Dr. Martinez provided updated assessments of my mental health and parenting capacity. The night before the follow-up hearing, I couldn't sleep. The baby was active, rolling and kicking as if sensing my anxiety. I wrote another letter to her, trying to explain why I was fighting so hard to keep her safe from her grandfather. The words felt inadequate. Morning came too soon. I dressed carefully again, trying to project stability and competence. Mr. Lee drove me to court, offering quiet reassurance, but we both knew the odds were against us. The system believed in redemption, in second chances, even when victims paid the price. In the courtroom, Dad looked even more composed than before. He'd gained weight, looked healthier, more like the father I'd known before Mom died. For a moment, I almost believed his transformation myself. Then his eyes met mine, and I saw the familiar possessive gleam. The judge reviewed the new submissions quickly. He dismissed the unsigned statement as hearsay. The surveillance patterns were concerning, but not conclusive. He praised my mental health providers for their support, but noted that needing extensive therapy suggested ongoing struggles. Dad's lawyer presented letters from the halfway house staff praising his adjustment. Fellow residents described him as helpful and kind. His therapy group leader testified about his breakthrough moments, his acceptance of his wife's death, his healthy desire to support his daughter. When the judge asked Dad to speak, he delivered a masterful performance. He tearfully acknowledged his breakdown after losing Poppy. He took responsibility for frightening me, for letting grief distort reality. He spoke about wanting to make amends, to be the father and grandfather he should be. He never quite admitted to the assault. His words danced around it, implying confusion and misunderstanding rather than violence. He expressed regret for the pain he'd caused while subtly suggesting I'd misinterpreted his actions due to my own trauma from losing Mom. The judge seemed moved by Dad's apparent contrition. He spoke about the healing power of forgiveness, the importance of children knowing their grandparents, the tragedy of families torn apart by mental illness. My heart sank with each word. The ruling came down like a hammer. Supervised visits once a week at a family center. A social worker would observe and report back. If things went well for 3 months, they'd reassess for unsupervised visits. The restraining order would be modified to allow these meetings. I sat frozen as the judge outlined the details. Dad would have 2 hours each Sunday with the baby once she was born. I was required to facilitate these visits or risk being held in contempt. The judge encouraged me to attend therapy with Dad to work toward reconciliation. My lawyer squeezed my hand, whispering that we could appeal, but appeals took time and money I didn't have. Dad had won. The system had handed him exactly what he wanted: access to his wife and their baby. After the ruling, I stumbled out of the courthouse in a daze. Dad maintained his distance, playing the respectful father, giving me space, but his smile as he talked to his lawyer said everything. He'd manipulated the system perfectly. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the custody order. In 12 weeks after the baby was born and I'd recovered, I'd have to hand her to Dad for 2 hours every Sunday, watch him hold her while calling me Poppy, pretend everything was normal while he lived out his delusion. I called Dr. Martinez, who helped me process the ruling. We discussed coping strategies, ways to maintain boundaries during visits, how to document any concerning behavior. She reminded me that supervised visits meant witnesses, protection, accountability, but we both knew supervision could be manipulated too. The private investigator offered to continue surveillance on Dad, building a case for the future, but his fees were adding up, and my savings were depleted from moving, legal costs, medical bills. I had to choose between gathering evidence and preparing for the baby. I met with the family center coordinator to understand their procedures. The facility was cheerful, painted in bright colors with toys and books everywhere. The supervisor seemed nice but overwhelmed, juggling multiple families. She assured me they took safety seriously, but her caseload suggested otherwise. As my due date approached, the packages intensified. A car seat appeared on my doorstep, a stroller in the building's lobby. Always items I needed but couldn't afford, always with cards in Dad's handwriting. The family center visits hadn't started yet, but he was making his presence felt. I installed more cameras, changed my phone number number again, varied my routes obsessively, but short of disappearing entirely, I couldn't escape his reach. The law now required me to maintain contact. Running would make me a criminal, cost me custody entirely. Dr. Cole helped me develop a birth plan that prioritized safety. I registered at the hospital under an alias, restricted visitor access, arranged for security escorts, but I couldn't hide forever. The judge buying Dad's whole Reformed Patient Act while dismissing actual evidence feels way too convenient. Why is the court so quick to believe someone fresh out of psychiatric hold over documented patterns? Eventually, I'd have to face Dad in that cheerful family center room. The contractions started 3 weeks early, intense and sudden. Mr. Lee drove me to the hospital as I gripped the door handle through each wave of pain. I'd imagined Mom being there for this moment. Instead, I was bringing Dad's delusion into the world. Labor lasted 14 hours. I refused pain medication at first, wanting to stay alert, maintain control, but as the pain intensified, I accepted help. The nurses were kind, professional, unaware of the circumstances that created this pregnancy. When she finally arrived, my daughter was perfect. Tiny fingers, rosebud mouth, eyes that looked startlingly like Mom's. I held her against my chest, overwhelmed by protective instinct. She was innocent, deserving of love despite her origin. I named her Sarah, after Mom's middle name, a connection to the grandmother she'd never meet, the woman Dad had tried to resurrect through me. Sarah's existence was complicated, but she was mine to protect. The hospital stay was brief but peaceful. Security kept visitors away. I learned to breastfeed, change diapers, swaddle, normal new mother things that felt surreal given the circumstances. Sarah slept against my chest, trusting and vulnerable. Back home, reality hit hard. The custody order loomed. In 6 weeks, I'd have to take Sarah to meet Dad, hand her over to the man who'd assaulted me, who still believed I was his dead wife. The countdown felt like approaching execution. I threw myself into caring for Sarah, finding purpose in her needs. She cried, ate, slept in unpredictable patterns that left me exhausted but focused. Each day brought new challenges that pushed Dad from my mind temporarily, but the packages continued. Designer baby clothes, expensive toys, a rocking chair that appeared in the hallway, all reminders that Dad was counting down too, preparing for his reunion with his family. Dr. Martinez visited, helping me process the approaching visits. We role-played scenarios, practiced responses to Dad's potential behavior. She reminded me that I was strong, capable, a survivor, but strength felt finite against Dad's relentless delusion. The family center called to schedule our first visit. The coordinator walked me through procedures again, assuring me of their safety protocols. Dad had been meeting with them too, demonstrating his commitment to following rules. Everyone seemed impressed by his dedication. I spent the night before the first visit holding Sarah, memorizing her face. She was 6 weeks old, just starting to smile. The thought of Dad holding her, projecting his delusions onto her innocent form, made me physically ill. Morning came anyway. I dressed Sarah in neutral colors, nothing that might trigger Dad's fantasies. Packed a diaper bag with supplies for 2 hours. Mr. Lee offered to drive us, but I needed to do this alone. The family center was busy with other supervised visits. Divorced parents exchanging children, grandparents meeting grandkids, normal family dynamics that made our situation seem even more twisted. I signed in, my hands shaking. Dad was already there, sitting in the assigned room. He'd brought gifts, a stuffed elephant, a hand-knitted blanket. He stood when I entered, his eyes immediately going to Sarah. The hunger in his expression made me pull her closer. The supervisor introduced herself, explained the rules, no leaving the room, no aggressive behavior, respect boundaries. Dad nodded along, playing the perfect gentleman. Then she gestured for me to hand Sarah over. I froze. Every instinct screamed against releasing my daughter, but the supervisor waited expectantly, and I knew refusal meant contempt charges. Slowly, carefully, I transferred Sarah to Dad's waiting arms. He cradled her like she was made of spun glass, his face transformed with wonder, with love that would have been beautiful if not for its foundation in delusion. He whispered something I couldn't hear, but his lips clearly formed Poppy. For 2 hours, I watched Dad hold my daughter. He sang lullabies Mom used to sing, changed her diaper with practiced ease, fed her the bottle I'd pumped. To any observer, he looked like a loving grandfather. Only I saw the moments he looked at me with possessive certainty. When time ended, Dad reluctantly returned Sarah. He thanked me for bringing his granddaughter, his voice formal and appropriate. But as I turned to leave, he added quietly that Sarah had her mother's eyes. The supervisor didn't catch the implication. I made it to my car before breaking down. Sarah fussed in her car seat, picking up on my distress. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to compose myself for the drive home. 1 visit down, 11 more before potential unsupervised access. The weeks fell into a horrible routine. Every Sunday, I brought Sarah to the family center. Every Sunday, Dad played grandfather while calling me Poppy when the supervisor was distracted. He was careful, strategic, maintaining plausible deniability. I documented everything in a journal. Every comment, every look, every moment that felt wrong. But without recordings, without witnesses who understood the context, my concerns sounded paranoid. The supervisor's reports praised Dad's appropriate behavior. Sarah grew during those weeks, started laughing, reaching for objects, recognizing faces. She smiled at Dad during visits, responding to his gentle handling. The betrayal of her innocent affection felt like another violation. Between visits, life continued. I found remote work doing data entry, allowing me to stay home with Sarah. Money was tight but manageable. Mr. Lee helped with groceries sometimes, claiming his wife had overcooked. Small kindnesses that kept us afloat. Dad's packages evolved. Now they included photos from the visits, moments the supervisor had captured and shared with him, pictures of him holding Sarah, of her sleeping in his arms. Each image a reminder that he was building evidence of his own. At the 3-month review, the supervisor recommended continuing supervised visits. Dad had been model behavior, but she'd noticed some concerning dynamics. My obvious discomfort. His occasional slips calling me the wrong name. Not enough to deny access, but enough to maintain supervision. Dad's lawyer pushed for unsupervised visits anyway. The judge compromised. 6 more months of supervision, then they'd reconsider. I'd bought time, but the clock kept ticking toward inevitable escalation. Dr. Cole helped me plan for the possibility of unsupervised visits. We discussed safety protocols, documentation strategies, emergency plans, but planning felt like accepting defeat, like admitting Dad would eventually get what he wanted. One Sunday, Dad brought a photo album to the visit, pictures of Mom throughout their marriage. He showed Sarah each one, telling stories about her grandmother, but in his narrative, I was Poppy in every photo. The supervisor thought he was confused, mixing up generations. I knew better. After that visit, I found a letter under my windshield, Dad's handwriting, though he'd been nowhere near my car. Inside, a single line. Our daughter is beautiful, just like you. The violation of him claiming Sarah as ours made my skin crawl. I reported the letter, but couldn't prove Dad had placed it there. Security footage showed nothing. His time at the family center was accounted for. Another incident that looked like paranoia on my part, manipulation on his. Sarah started solid foods, began crawling, spoke her first word, mama. Each milestone felt bittersweet, tainted by Dad's Dad's forced presence in our lives. I celebrated privately, keeping joy small and contained where he couldn't corrupt it. The supervised visits continued their awful rhythm. Dad grew bolder in his comments but stayed just within acceptable bounds. He brought gifts that referenced Mom's preferences, sang songs from their wedding, built a narrative only I fully understood. 6 months passed. The review hearing approached like a storm system, inevitable and destructive. Dad's lawyer submitted glowing reports, letters from the halfway house, proof of his stability. My documentation of subtle violations looked petty in comparison. I testified about the letter, the comments, the persistent delusion. But without hard evidence, my words carried little weight. The judge noted my obvious anxiety, suggesting it might be affecting my perception. Dad sat there looking concerned and fatherly. The supervisor testified honestly. Dad's behavior was mostly appropriate, but something felt off. She couldn't articulate exactly what. The judge pressed for specifics she couldn't provide. Bad feelings weren't legal arguments. This time the ruling went differently. Unsupervised visits, but limited. 2 hours every other Sunday at Dad's halfway house, with check-ins before and after. A compromise that satisfied no one, but especially not me. My lawyer filed for reconsideration immediately, but the judge had decided. In 2 weeks, I'd have to leave Sarah alone with Dad. Trust the man who drugged and assaulted me to care for my daughter without witnesses. I spent those 2 weeks in a haze of preparation and dread. Taught Sarah to scream loudly. Practiced emergency protocols she was too young to understand. Installed a GPS tracker in her diaper bag. Desperate measures that felt inadequate. The night before the first unsupervised visit, I held Sarah all night. She slept peacefully, unaware of the danger I was about to place her in. I wrote another letter to her, explaining why I had to follow the court's orders, hoping she'd understand someday. Morning arrived with cruel certainty. I drove to Dad's halfway house, a modest building with a small yard. Other residents watched from windows as I carried Sarah to the door. Dad answered immediately, like he'd been waiting. He looked normal, calm, grandfatherly. He thanked me for trusting him, promised to take good care of our daughter. Those supervised visits sound like watching a horror movie in slow motion. Dad singing Mom's lullabies while calling the narrator by her dead mother's name. That supervisor missed more red flags than a colorblind referee at a bullfighting match. The slip was subtle, but I caught it. Our daughter. The supervisor wasn't there to notice. I handed Sarah over, my arms feeling immediately empty. Dad took her inside, closing the door between us. I sat in my car for the full 2 hours, watching the house, fighting the urge to break down the door. When time was up, Dad returned Sarah promptly. She was fine, happy even, clean diaper, full belly, holding a new toy. He'd been perfect, careful, building trust for the long game. I searched her for any sign of harm, but found nothing. Back home, I bathed Sarah thoroughly, needing to wash away his touch. She babbled happily, unaware of my panic. The visit had gone well by all observable measures, but I knew Dad was planning something bigger. The unsupervised visits continued. Each time, Sarah returned unharmed. Each time, Dad pushed boundaries slightly. A new outfit that looked like something Mom would wear. A lullaby in Polish, Mom's native language. Subtle claims of ownership I couldn't prove. I lived for the weeks between visits. Took Sarah to baby classes, the park, anywhere normal and safe. Built a life in the spaces between Dad's intrusions. But the countdown to each visit poisoned even good moments. One visit, Sarah returned with her hair styled differently. Tiny braids Mom used to wear. Dad claimed Sarah's hair had been tangled. He'd just tried to fix it. Reasonable explanation. Sinister implication. The halfway house staff saw nothing wrong. I started therapy with someone new, Dr. Kim, who specialized in coercive control. She understood the subtle nature of Dad's manipulation, helped me document patterns. But documentation felt futile when the court had already chosen his side. Dad requested holiday visitation. His lawyer argued that grandparents deserved special occasions too. The judge granted Thanksgiving afternoon, supervised due to the extended time. Another victory for Dad's patient campaign. Thanksgiving arrived gray and cold. I delivered Sarah to the family center where Dad waited with a feast. Turkey, stuffing, all Mom's recipes. He'd recreated their family traditions, inserting Sarah and me into roles we didn't choose. During dinner, Dad told Sarah stories about past Thanksgivings. In his version, I was always Poppy. The supervisor corrected him once, but he continued accidentally, mixing us up. Sarah was too young to understand, but the groundwork was being laid. After that visit, I found myself planning escape more seriously, researching cities where we could disappear, calculate how long my savings could last. But running meant becoming a fugitive, losing any legal protection. Dad would win by default. Dr. Kim helped me see the trap clearly. Stay and endure escalating violations. Run and lose everything. Fight and be dismissed as paranoid. Every option led to Dad maintaining some control. The system had given him that power. Winter deepened. Sarah learned to walk, tottering between furniture. Each milestone happened in the shadow of Dad's presence. I celebrated privately, keeping joy small and protected. But children demand joy, and Sarah's laughter filled our apartment despite everything. The visits blurred together. Dad pushing boundaries, me documenting violations, the court seeing a grandfather's love and a mother's instability. The pattern felt unbreakable, a cycle designed to wear me down. One Sunday, Dad wasn't at the halfway house. The staff said he'd moved to independent living, a small apartment nearby. Still monitored, still compliant with requirements, but freer than ever. The visits would continue at his new place. His apartment was worse than the halfway house, decorated with photos of Mom, of their life together. But in every family photo, my face had been digitally replaced with Mom's. The distortion was subtle but undeniable. Sarah's grandmother everywhere, her mother erased. I photographed everything, but Dad claimed ignorance. The photos had always looked that way. Maybe I was misremembering. Gaslighting so smooth the supervisor almost believed it, but she noted my concern. A small victory. Spring arrived with Sarah's first birthday approaching. Dad requested to host the party during his visit. I refused, holding firm on this boundary. The judge supported my decision, but granted Dad an extra hour for his own celebration. I threw Sarah a small party with Mr. Lee and a few neighbors. Normal cake, simple decorations, genuine love. But knowing Dad would have his own party later tainted the joy. Everything existed in shadow now. Dad's party was elaborate. Professional photographer, custom cake, a room full of toys. He'd invited halfway house staff who thought they were witnessing grandfather's love. Sarah laughed and played, unaware of the performance around her. The photos from Dad's party appeared online later. A Facebook page I hadn't known existed. Grandpa John and baby Sarah, filled with images from visits, comments from strangers praising his dedication. My absence notable but unexplained. My lawyer sent cease and desist letters, but Dad claimed ignorance. Anyone could have made the page. The photos were public from the family center. Another violation I couldn't definitively prove. The digital footprint grew. Summer brought new challenges. Dad requested vacation time with Sarah. A week at a lake cabin, supervised by halfway house staff. The judge considered it, weighing family bonding against my objections. The final ruling, a weekend, with daily check-ins. I spent that weekend in agony, calling every few hours, demanding proof Sarah was safe. The staff grew irritated with my anxiety. anxiety. Dad sent photos of Sarah playing in the water, looking happy. Evidence of his good grandparenting for future court battles. When Sarah returned, she called me Poppy, just once, correcting herself immediately to Mama. But that single slip revealed Dad's weekend project. He'd been teaching her, planting seeds of his delusion in her developing mind. I recorded everything, building files of evidence, but each incident alone seemed minor. Together, they painted a picture the court refused to see. A grandfather's quirks, not systematic manipulation. A mother's paranoia, not justified fear. Dr. Kim suggested a different approach. Stop fighting Dad's narrative directly. Focus on building Sarah's resilience, her sense of self. Arm her with truth appropriate for her age. Long-term strategy for a battle I couldn't win short-term. Fall came with custody review hearings. Dad's lawyer pushed for overnight visits, citing his exemplary compliance. My lawyer countered with documented concerns, but they felt repetitive, worn. The judge had heard it all before. This time, Dad testified about his recovery journey. He spoke eloquently about grief, about healing, about the joy Sarah brought to his life. He acknowledged past mistakes while subtly minimizing them. Oscar-worthy performance of reformed grandfather. I testified too, but my words felt hollow against his polished narrative. The judge saw a young mother struggling with trauma, unable to forgive. Dad saw Poppy across the courtroom, his wife fighting their love. Only I knew which perception mattered more. The ruling split the difference again. Overnight visits once a month, starting after Sarah turned 2. Continued day visits every other week. The slow expansion of Dad's access felt inevitable, like watching a rising tide. That night, I sat in Sarah's room watching her sleep. In 6 months, she'd spend nights at Dad's apartment. Wake up surrounded by Mom's photos, by Dad's delusions. I couldn't protect her from that confusion, but I could prepare her. Started reading books about families looking different. Taught her our real names, our real relationships. Built foundation of truth that Dad couldn't completely erode. Small acts of resistance in an unfair war. The visits continued through winter. Dad grew bolder with overnight access approaching. He talked about redecorating Sarah's room at his place. Showed her photos of the princess bed he'd bought, making his apartment her second home before she'd spent a night there. I found a preschool with excellent security, enrolling Sarah early. Structure and witnesses for parts of her week. Teachers who'd noticed concerning behavior. Building a village of protection since the system wouldn't provide one. Dad learned about the preschool immediately. His network still watched, still reported. He offered to share pickup duties, to be emergency contact. The school required court orders to deny him. Another battlefield in our endless war. Spring returned with Sarah's second birthday. 2 years since that morning that changed everything. She was walking, talking, developing personality. Sweet but stubborn, curious but cautious. Mom's eyes and my determination. The first overnight visit arrived too quickly. I packed Sarah's bag with her favorite stuffed animals, comfort items that smelled like home, tucked in the GPS tracker, though Dad would likely find it. Kissed her goodbye at his door. That night stretched endlessly. I sat by my phone, waiting for crisis. But morning came with Sarah returned safely, tired but unharmed, chattering about Grandpa's pancakes. Normal toddler response to a sleepover. Only I heard the wrongness underneath. The overnight visits became monthly routine. Sarah adapted as children do, resilient and flexible, but small changes accumulated. She'd return calling me different names, singing songs in Polish, wearing clothes that looked like Mom's style shrunk down. I documented everything meticulously, built files that would mean something someday, even if courts ignored them now. Evidence for Sarah when she was older, proof I'd fought for her, paper trail of a war fought in increments. Dad pushed for more access as Sarah thrived in his care. Why limit a loving grandfather? The judge agreed to mediation, hoping we could reach agreement without court battles. Forced collaboration with my abuser, dressed up as progressive justice. His apartment decorated with Mom's photos where my face is digitally replaced. That's not grief, that's calculated erasure. I wonder what Sarah actually understands when she sees those twisted family pictures covering his walls. Mediation felt like torture. Sitting across from Dad while lawyers discussed schedules. Him smiling at me with possessive certainty. Me trying to advocate for Sarah while navigating his delusions. The mediator seeing conflict, but not its source. We reached agreement through exhaustion. Overnight visits twice monthly. Holidays alternating. Phone calls between visits. Standard custody arrangement that ignored extraordinary circumstances. Dad got almost everything he wanted, but I got something too. Right of first refusal if Dad couldn't watch Sarah. Notification of any address changes. Small protections that might matter later. Victories measured in millimeters, but victories nonetheless. Summer passed in the new routine. Sarah spent 4 nights a month at Dad's apartment. Came home confused but adjusting. Started asking why Grandpa called Mommy different names. I explained simply, age appropriately, building her understanding slowly. Dad's apartment evolved into a shrine. Every visit revealed new photos, new decorations honoring Mom. But Sarah was edited into old family photos now too. 3 generations collapsed into his singular delusion. Past and present merged. I started dating cautiously. Ben from the grief support group understood complicated families. He didn't push, didn't judge the custody arrangement, offered quiet support and normal conversation. Reminder that life existed beyond Dad's influence. Dad learned about Ben immediately. The next visit, he questioned Sarah about Mommy's friend, planted seeds of suspicion in her young mind, made comments about loyalty and family, subtle poison I couldn't completely counteract. But Ben stayed steady, attended Sarah's preschool events, helped install better security cameras, never tried to play father, just offered consistent presence. Dad hated him, which felt like endorsement. Fall brought custody review again. Dad's lawyer pushed for equal time, citing Sarah's adjustment. My lawyer countered with concerns about identity confusion. The judge ordered psychological evaluation for Sarah, another professional to convince. The psychologist met with Sarah several times, observed visits with both Dad and me. Her report was mixed. Sarah showed some confusion about family relationships but appeared well adjusted overall. No immediate harm that justified reducing Dad's access. Court felt like defeat before it started. Dad had played perfectly, staying just within bounds. I looked like the bitter mother denying a grandfather's love. Sarah was too young to articulate the subtle wrongness she experienced. The ruling expanded Dad's time to every other weekend. Major holidays shared equally, 2 weeks in summer. The slow creep toward equal custody felt unstoppable. Legal system completing what Dad had started that morning. I focused on what I could control. Sarah's education about her identity, building her sense of self, creating stable home environment, documenting everything for future understanding, playing long game I might not win. Winter holidays split for the first time. Christmas Eve with me, Christmas Day with Dad. Sarah excited about 2 celebrations, not understanding the division. I made our traditions distinct from whatever Dad created. He sent photos from his Christmas. Sarah on his lap, wearing a dress identical to one Mom wore in old photos. The tree decorated exactly as Mom had done. Sarah holding a doll that looked eerily like Mom. Pieces of a puzzle I couldn't solve. New year brought reflection. 3 years since Mom died, 2.5 2.5 years since Dad's breakdown. Sarah growing up in the shadow of his delusion. But also, we'd survived. Built life despite circumstances. Found joy in small spaces. The custody schedule settled into routine. Painful, but predictable. Sarah learned to navigate two homes. Two realities. I reinforced truth while Dad spun fiction. She'd have to choose what to believe eventually. Spring arrived with legal bills I couldn't pay. The fight had drained everything. I negotiated payment plans, took extra work, but couldn't afford more court battles. Dad knew this. Would use it. Money another weapon in his arsenal. Sarah started asking harder questions. Why did Grandpa have pictures of Mommy everywhere? Why did he get sad when she called me Mommy? I explained mental illness simply. How sometimes brains got confused. Truth delivered gently. Dad requested summer vacation again. 2 full weeks this time, as court had granted. I couldn't object without funds for lawyers. Had to trust the man who'd assaulted me with extended time. System working exactly as he'd planned. Those 2 weeks crawled by. Daily calls where Sarah sounded happy but different. Subtle shifts in her voice, her words, Dad's influence seeping deeper. But she came home still knowing who I was. Still calling me Mommy. Small victory. Fall brought kindergarten enrollment. Dad insisted on being involved, attending meetings. Teachers saw devoted grandfather, not dangerous delusion. I provided court orders, explained custody arrangement, but couldn't explain the whole truth. Parent-teacher conferences became battlegrounds. Dad telling teachers about Poppy's history. Me correcting to Stacy. Teachers confused but trying to stay neutral. Sarah absorbing the conflict, learning to navigate adult confusion. Halloween arrived with competing visions. I planned simple costume, trick-or-treating with neighbors. Dad created elaborate princess outfit, professional photos. Sarah caught between normal childhood and performative fantasy, choosing both because she had to. The holidays approached with familiar dread, dividing Sarah's time, competing traditions, but also, Ben proposed quietly, privately. Simple ring, sincere promise. Future beyond Dad's shadow. I said yes, knowing complications it would bring. Dad learned about engagement immediately. Next visit, he told Sarah about families staying together, about loyalty and betrayal. 5-year-old confused by concepts she couldn't grasp, manipulation through innocence. But we planned wedding anyway. Small ceremony, just close friends. Sarah as flower girl. Life moving forward despite Dad's attempts to freeze time. Creating new family structure he couldn't control. Winter passed in preparation and custody battles. Dad objecting to name changes, to Ben's role. Judge ruling on minutia of our lives, but momentum building toward change. Spring wedding offering hope. The wedding day dawned bright. Sarah in her flower girl dress, excited about flowers. Ben steady beside me. Mr. Lee officiating with online credentials. Simple ceremony in park. Dad notably absent but psychically present. That evening, Sarah at Dad's for scheduled visit. Our wedding night spent anxiously waiting for her return, but she came back happy, full of stories. Dad had thrown his own party, calling it anniversary celebration. Competing realities to the end. Life settled into new rhythm. Ben moved in gradually, respecting Sarah's adjustment. Dad escalated subtly, testing boundaries. But we had stability now. 2 parents against 1 delusion. Better odds than before. Summer arrived with custody unchanged. Dad getting half of Sarah's vacation, but now Ben helped manage exchanges, document concerns, mail presents that challenged Dad's narrative. Small shift in power dynamics. Sarah started therapy, processing her complex family. Therapist helping her understand different homes, different rules, building tools for navigating Dad's delusion. Professional support I'd needed years ago. Dad requested family therapy, claiming communication breakdown. Judge ordered sessions. Sitting in room with him while therapist mediated felt surreal. He called me Poppy throughout. Therapist noted but didn't challenge. Sessions revealed Dad's entrenchment. 3 years of treatment hadn't touched core delusion. He'd learned to hide it better, perform sanity, but still believed I was his wife. Still saw Sarah as our child together. Therapist recommended supervised visits return. Major victory after years of expansion. Judge reluctantly agreed to trial period. Dad's mask had slipped enough. System finally seeing what I'd always known. Dad raged about conspiracy, about Ben poisoning Sarah against him. His lawyer quit. New lawyer less polished, more aggressive. Desperation showing, careful performance cracking under pressure. Supervised visits felt like starting over. Family center, neutral ground, witnesses. Dad sullen but compliant. Sarah confused but adapting. Professional noting every interaction. Evidence building properly this time. Fall brought stability. Wedding settled. Supervision established. Sarah thriving. Not victory but balance. Dad still present but contained. His influence limited by oversight. Space to breathe, to heal. Sarah's questions grew more sophisticated. Understanding Grandpa was sick, not bad. Learning mental illness wasn't her fault. Building framework for future understanding. Truth as foundation for growth. Winter holidays divided but manageable. Supervision preventing Dad's elaborate fantasies. Simple visits focused on Sarah. His delusions still present but muted. System working as it should have initially. New year reflection showed progress. 4 years since Mom's death. Sarah healthy despite everything. New family structure supporting her. Dad's influence waning. Time and truth slowly winning. But vigilance remained necessary. Dad planning something. Always planning. Supervised visits chafing his control. Legal system still fallible. Victory temporary without constant fighting. Spring brought hope. Sarah in school, making friends. Normal childhood emerging. Dad background presence rather than central figure. Ben and I planning future. Small family building despite past trauma. The custody review approached. Dad pushing for unsupervised return. Our evidence of ongoing delusion strong. Sarah's therapist supporting continued supervision. Judge weighing family rights against child safety. Final hearing felt different. Years of documentation mattering. Pattern of manipulation clear. Sarah old enough to express preferences. System finally aligned with reality. Truth having weight at last. Judge ruled supervision permanent. Dad's delusion unchanged despite treatment. Sarah's well-being paramount. Visits continuing but controlled. Not full victory but significant protection. Legal validation of years of fighting. Dad's reaction predictable. Accusations of conspiracy. Threats of appeal. But no lawyer would take case. His performance exhausted. Mask too damaged to repair. System finally seeing truth. We left courthouse quietly victorious. Sarah safe from overnight confusion. Supervision ensuring boundaries. Future clearer if not perfect. Small family intact despite everything. That evening, quiet celebration. Sarah playing with Ben. Normal domestic scene. 4 years of fighting for this moment. Simple peace feeling extraordinary. Survival transformed into living. But story not ended. Dad still visiting supervised. Still believing his delusion. Still Sarah's grandfather despite everything. Complicated reality requiring constant navigation. Victory measured in safety, not absence. Moving forward meant accepting his permanent presence. Teaching Sarah to love safely. Building life around damage. Creating joy despite circumstances. Choosing hope over bitterness. Years would bring new challenges. Sarah's adolescence, dating, independence. Dad aging with delusion in intact. Our family evolving around absence. Mom's memory honored through truth. But tonight, peace. Sarah asleep safely. Ben beside me. Mr. Lee checking in. Support system strong. Dad contained by supervision. Life possible despite trauma. Morning would bring new day. Drop off at family center. Supervised visit routine. Dad seeing Poppy across room. Sarah knowing better. Truth protection enough. We'd survived worst years. Built family from ashes. Found love after violence. Created safety through persistence. Not fairy tale ending. Just real life continuing. Sarah would grow knowing her story. Understanding family complexity. Learning strength through survival. Carrying truth forward. Breaking cycle through knowledge. Dad would age in delusion. Seeing wife and daughter. Granddaughter as shared child. Reality forever filtered. Tragedy of untreated illness. System managing. Not healing. But we persist. Small family strong. Love overcoming manipulation. Truth defeating delusion. Life winning through daily choices. Survival transformed to thriving. The end wasn't ending. Just transition to managing. Permanent vigilance with periods of peace. Sarah protected if not sheltered. Family defined by choice, not blood. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Next week, next year. But foundation laid strong. Support system reliable. Truth documented thoroughly. Future possible if uncertain. For now, enough. Sarah safe. Family intact. Dad supervised. Life continuing forward. Victory in survival. Hope in tomorrow. Peace in present moment. Our story ongoing but stable. Trauma transformed to strength. Love conquering fear. Small family prevailing. Truth our protection. Future our victory. Appreciate you letting me ramble and wonder out loud this whole time. Honestly didn't expect to end up here, but hey, that's half the fun, right? Catch you around. Hopefully sooner than later.